NVIDIA has been unstoppable. A $3 trillion market cap, 95% dominance in AI chips, the undisputed king of artificial intelligence. But last Friday, something happened that sent shockwaves to Silicon Valley. A Chinese company reported terrible earnings, missed revenue, they're burning through cash, hemorrhaging money, but yet their stock exploded 13% in one day. Monday in Hong Kong, another 19%. Wall Street just saw the beginning of NVIDIA's worst nightmare. And if this company succeeds, Jensen Huang's empire could crumble faster than anyone thought possible. Before I dive into that, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into the most dangerous threat NVIDIA has ever faced and how Alibaba is positioning themselves as China's answer to the AI chip giant in a battle that combines cutting-edge technology, geopolitical warfare, and hundreds of billions in investment. Now, this isn't just, David versus Goliath. This could be the story of how NVIDIA's trillion-dollar empire gets dethroned. But let's start with the mind-bending earnings report that Alibaba gave this past 29th of August. Like I said before, they missed revenue expectations by 2%, coming in at 247 billion won. Their e-commerce margins absolutely compressed, and their cash burn from instant commerce is staggering 22 billion won expected next quarter. But here's what really gets interesting. Buried in all that earnings call was one single line that kind of changed everything for them. Alibaba announced that they're investing 380 billion won, which is about $53 billion into the AI and cloud infrastructure over the next 3 years. So to put that in perspective, that's more than Alibaba has actually spent on AI and cloud infrastructure for the entire decade combined. So these guys are really bullish on this. They're going full throttle, so respect to them. CEO Eddie Wu called it a once-in-a-lifetime generation opportunity, and suddenly Wall Street did not care about the current losses that they're experiencing. They saw NVIDIA's Achilles heel being targeted with surgical precision. And just before the earnings, the Wall Street Journal broke news that kind of sent shockwaves through Silicon Valley. Alibaba has a new AI chip in testing, and it's designed specifically to destroy NVIDIA's stronghold on the market. Unlike their previous Hongguang 800 chip manufactured by Taiwan's TSMC, this new chip is actually being made entirely in mainland China. We're talking about a 7 nanometer inference-focused processor manufactured by SMIC using the DUV multi-patterning, basically achieving what shouldn't be possible without the advanced EUV equipment that's banned from export to China. And here's the cool part. Alibaba isn't trying to beat NVIDIA at training massive AI models. They're focusing on inference, the part where AI actually delivers results to users. Think of it like this. If training is building the brain, inference is actually using it. So it's like applied knowledge, right? And inference is where the real money is actually made in AI services. The chip is designed to be compatible with PyTorch and TensorFlow, meaning that the developers can port their existing code with minimal challenges. And instead of selling these chips, Alibaba will only offer them through their cloud platform. So customers rent the computing power, not the hardware. It's the same playbook Amazon used with Amazon Web Services to actually crush traditional IT companies. And we all know how that turned out. Amazon's absolutely killing the game still to this day. To understand why this threatens NVIDIA's very existence, we need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Since 2022, the US systematically cut off China's access to advanced semiconductors, and NVIDIA is absolutely running out of room to maneuver. NVIDIA's H100, banned. The A100, banned. Even the watered-down H800, designed specifically for China, banned as of October 2023. And the only chip NVIDIA can kind of sell to China is H20, which is just 15% of H100's compatibility. Even that faces licensing restrictions and security concerns from Chinese regulators who worry about potential backdoors. Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, recently called losing China's access a tremendous loss. And for good reason. We're talking about a $50 billion market that's slipping through their fingers. In China's response, the Big Fund 3, a $47.5 billion semiconductor investment fund that was launched in, I believe, 2024, they add in a national AI industry investment funds of $8.2 billion, plus regional funds, and we're talking about over $200 billion that's kind of being used to weaponize to destroy NVIDIA's dominance. So they're doing everything in their power to pretty much remove that reliance on NVIDIA. The message from Beijing is pretty clear. If we don't buy it, we build it ourselves, right? And we'll make sure American companies never ever hold us hostage again. But Alibaba is not alone in this coordinated assault on NVIDIA's empire. Let me break down the Chinese AI chip arm, and it's kind of mobilizing. Leads the charge with their Ascend 910C chip. They sold 450,000 units in 2024, which is pretty impressive, but still, of course, less than half of NVIDIA's 1 million H20 sales. The 910C delivers about 60 to 80% of NVIDIA's 100's inference performance, but production is actually limited by SMIC's manufacturing capacity and those painful 20% yield rates. Baidu has their Kunlun chips powering a 30,000 chip cluster that can train models very similar to DeepSeek, right? So they're even making their chips. The challenges are real, don't get me wrong. China's equipment is about 20 years behind of ASML. SMIC's 7nm processor requires complex multi-patterning that results in 20% yields versus the ideal 90%. So they can't access high bandwidth memory technology, and they're 2 generations behind in memory standards. But here's where NVIDIA's actually, I guess you could say, should be losing sleep. So of course, remember that DeepSeek company? Yeah, they just prove you don't need the best hardware if you have brilliant software, right? Their R1 model achieved GPT-4 level performance, but that was trained for just $5.6 million, right? So it wasn't a lot of money, relatively speaking. And they're using old hardware when they did it. So it's actually kind of impressive in that sense as well. They did it through incredible efficiency innovations, having custom frameworks, 8-bit data formats, and optimized workload distribution. This is China's real strategy. If you can't match the hardware, revolutionize the software. Make every compute cycle count. It's like winning a Formula 1 race with less powerful engine while being a better driver and having a more aerodynamic car, right? So here's NVIDIA's nightmare scenario. What happens when Chinese efficiency innovations get paired with increasingly capable domestic hardware? That performance gap absolutely disappears, but the cost advantage still remains massive. So let's kind of follow the money in that sense, right? Because the numbers reveal just how serious China is about, trying to destroy NVIDIA's monopoly. Alibaba alone is committing 380 billion yuan, and the Chinese government has deployed $912 billion in venture capital over the past decade, with 23% of it going to AI firms. Just this year, China announced $138 billion state venture capital fund, I guess you can call it. The kind of thing that kind of contradicts it is like they had investors buzzing. Despite all this investment, Alibaba is still losing money on every single transaction in instant commerce, right? So the capital expenditure jumped 120% year over year. They're sacrificing today's profits for tomorrow's dominance. And that just sounds like China's playbook, since the beginning of time, pretty much, right? As Citigroup's Alicia Yap noted, this is the largest investment ever by Chinese private enterprises in cloud and AI infrastructure. The markets are betting that Alibaba becomes China's AWS, pretty much, a high-margin infrastructure dominant and essential in every AI application in the country. And if they succeed, NVIDIA's Chinese revenues don't just decline, they kind of disappear. And so for NVIDIA, this is an existential crisis disguised as a $50 billion market loss, right? And China hasn't, I guess you could say, wasn't just their largest market before restrictions. It was their growth engine. The response, the H220 chip for China, with the Trump administration taking a 15% revenue cut, they're kind of exploring Blackwell architecture chips specifically for China. But every move requires navigating an increasingly complex. Other markets start to question whether they really need to pay NVIDIA's premium prices. And then, of course, success in China doesn't stay in China. It spreads globally. And the twist that's kind of coming from that could accelerate NVIDIA's decline is lower costs from efficient Chinese AI that might actually expand the total market. But with the Chinese companies capturing most of the growth, it's kind of like a Javon's paradox working against the incumbent. So what happens next? So here's my analysis of how NVIDIA's empire could absolutely crumble. All right, so I could be wrong, could be right. I guess we want to find out with time. Short term, so let's say 2025, 2026, the Chinese chips achieve 60% of NVIDIA's performance in specific tasks. Alibaba's new chip enters production, and of course, government mandates drive force adoption in state enterprises. And NVIDIA's China revenue probably drops around, let's call it 20 to 30%. Medium term, 2027 to 2030, the software ecosystem matures. Chinese companies achieve parity in inference workloads. Training capabilities remain limited but improve through system-level innovations. And NVIDIA's global market share starts eroding as the countries, start to question their independence on NVIDIA. But the real X factor is if China's tech giants like Alibaba or Tencent, ByteDance fully commit their resources to domestic chips, it creates a feedback loop that could accelerate development by years. Network effects work in reverse. Once the ecosystem tips, it tips very, very fast, and that bottleneck isn't just technology, it's the ecosystem. NVIDIA spent 18 years building CUDA. China's trying to replicate that in 5. And with $200 billion backing them, they might be able to pull it off. Now, all this really means that we're watching the potential end of NVIDIA's AI empire in real time. The tech world is splitting into 2 parallel universes, with one dominated by NVIDIA and US technology, of course, and the other increasingly self-sufficient, led by companies like Alibaba. This isn't just about chips. It's about who controls the infrastructure for the AI revolution. Alibaba is burning cash today to own China's AI future tomorrow and potentially challenge NVIDIA globally. And based on their stock surge, investors believe they're going to succeed. I have about 40 shares of Alibaba, so I'm not gonna lie, I am on that bandwagon as well. So I'm excited to see what happens over the next couple of years. And I'm still just building my position within Alibaba. So I'm trying my best to get to 100 shares before 2027 ends. So I have a lot of time, but there's other things I want to be buying too, right? There's other opportunities out there in the market. The stock market is the eighth wonder of the world. I just love it. I love this stuff. But back to the topic at hand, the contradiction in those earnings, so that was absolutely terrible last Friday. But transformative for tomorrow is exactly how disruption works, right? It looks impossible until suddenly it's inevitable. While Alibaba becomes China's NVIDIA and bring down a trillion-dollar giant, or will technical realities and NVIDIA's CUDA moat absolutely prove that, they're unstoppable? The answer only comes with time and will absolutely reshape not just these companies, but the entire balance of power in artificial intelligence. So just curious what you guys think. Leave some answers within the comments. Can China actually dethrone NVIDIA, or is this all hype? Drop your thoughts below. I read every single one. It means a lot to me that you guys actually enjoy the content. As you can see, I'm just getting started. Only have probably like 24 subscribers now. So hopefully in a couple of years, after being able to give you guys some valuable information and insights, we can really take this thing to the moon. So if you found this deep dive, valuable, of course, as always, please smash that like button, share with your friends, subscribe, hit that notification bell, because next week, we're going to be, doing the same exact thing and talk about more about AI, the stock market, different stocks, and especially Silicon Valley, and why, people like them are losing sleep over China's growth. Until then, keep questioning the paradoxes as always. They often hide the biggest revolutions. Thank you guys for tuning in, and see you next week. Peace.